Today I'm chatting to Todd Zemek from Counselling, a psychologist with a wealth of experience. I thought it might be nice to start off with a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Sure. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a psychotherapist at heart. So the difference is that psychologists really focus on function, whereas a therapist really works on healing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's always been a passion of mine for far too long. I've been quite a nerd when it comes to psychotherapy. I just find it absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. So in effect, you're a healer.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the subject we're going to focus on today is relationships. So first question, what would you say is the basis for a good relationship?
All the research shows that the relationships that are the healthiest, the most dynamic and sustainable are those that where people are willing to actually listen and understand their partner, even when they don't agree and even when it's distressing. And so that's the biggest challenge that I find, is that even when my fear influences your fear influences mine, we find a way to come back and to try to understand.
So what do you say is the most common symptom of a relationship that is under pressure or struggling?
In terms of personality, we all respond to stress in different ways. It's almost what defines us. But there's two things that happens, is that one, we either pursue and we start blaming and going on the attack. Mm-hmm. The other is that we withdraw and we shut down. And both can be really painful for ourselves and injurious to our partners. So they're usually the two signs, is that it becomes quite obvious that someone's really shutting down or someone's going on the attack. Now, for a lot of people, they get so caught up in the intensity of modern life and having a family and all the demands that if they're working effectively as a team in terms of that routine, then it's a great place for all these other things to hide. And so there's this private death. There's this private isolation where people carry, usually a lot of fear and a lot of sadness. That's the core of it. But it becomes the norm.
Okay.
And it's almost like a sense of service, that if I love my partner, that's a no-go zone. Mm-hmm. I better not step on that landmine because it's going to hurt them, and then I'll feel like a failure as a partner. So we have this, this unspoken agreement that there are these large no-go zones, which in the short term, in a sense, is a compassionate, kind thing to do. In the long term, however, we both start to feel like there are fundamental parts of us that are unlovable. And that's what breeds that contempt or the shutdown or the inexplicable reaction, the affair or the yelling or screaming that seems to come out of nowhere. Yeah. And it's tragic because people get cast as being crazy at those points, because from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem to make sense.
And life is so busy, and I think sometimes you push the relationship needs to the back.
Exactly.
And get on with what you need to get done to get through your day or whatever.
Yeah. So moving into a relationship in some ways means becoming selfless. And so particularly if a child or a parent becomes ill, or if the arrival of a new child. It's not about me anymore. So that becomes a virtue. And so under pressure, we do that more and more. We put ourselves in the back seat. And one of the greatest fears that I see, for men and women, but particularly culturally, I think for women, is that the fear that if I actually speak up about my needs and my pain, I'm going to be seen as selfish.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And if I start receiving or taking something, then that's fundamentally unlovable.
Wow.
So one of the things that we have to be really conscious of is supporting both men and women, but again, I think more so for women, is that it's not only okay to take, but that's a service for everybody else. Okay. If you're able to stabilise yourself through receiving, it's going to put you in a much stronger position to give. Yeah.
And so do you think that's something that is inbuilt from a young age? We're brought up that way to believe that?
Absolutely. Well, culturally and then in families, that we're loved and we've had to fill in the gaps of what wasn't available in the family. It may be as simple as just not making waves, that children are seen and not heard.
Yeah.
And we carry that forward.
My mum always used to say, peace for peace sake. Let's not cause any stress or drama. Let's just ignore that issue and push it aside.
I think a lot of people listening could relate to that, and they'd be nodding as you speak,
Absolutely. Do you think, as a general rule, people are not honest with themselves or their partners?
I think they're afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so much a question of what they can get away with or how they can manipulate. Of course, there's a small percentage of people who almost pride themselves on that. They're called psychopaths. And so, yes, those people do exist. But for the most part, we can explain people's behaviours through their fears in terms of their defensiveness. Yeah, okay. And so the key areas of fears is that we're not lovable if we're obsessive and our needs are about what's right and wrong. So a great example that I see all the time would be the dishes left in the sink, or where the shoes are left, or how we pack the car, all those sort of things. That's not just a preference. For those people, it feels life and death. If it's not right, it's wrong. And if it's wrong, it's dangerous.
Wow.
So it's not that they're just being petty or selfish.
Yep.
Their experience is that if people people close to me don't understand those things, then that means that they simply just don't care about me, because it is so overwhelmingly distressing. And it's so hard for them to express that because it's shameful. If the outside world is messy, that's shameful. But if my internal world is messy, that's just unlovable.
Wow.
So we can never fully explain that to people. For other people, it's about feeling smothered, that if I'm close, I'm going to fundamentally lose who I am, and I can't risk that. For other people, it's about being cared for after giving so much, as we were saying earlier. After giving so much, it never seems to come back to me. And I better not speak up, because that would be selfish and demanding.
Wow. If we could all just say what we really mean.
Imagine that. Yeah.
What sort of world would that be?
But we have to have a safe platform to step onto.
Yeah.
And if the shared understanding has been that that's been a no-go zone, it's not safe, we'll never get there. And so that's where, if you are fortunate enough to find a good therapist who actually can articulate those pain points and then set up an environment that's safe, it's amazing what happens is that you can start with a defensive, combative stance in an argument where people are ready to scream at each other. As soon as that safety arrives and people actually, for the first time, it may have been implicitly understood intuitively, but once they actually put words to that, it's the most extraordinary thing.
Wow.
That partners who were combative and aggressive are on the edge of their chair and their heart's coming out of their chest as they look in their eyes of their partner. And at that stage, they can't contain themselves. They have to reach out, put their hand on their leg. They take their hand, lift them up and hold them heart to heart, because it's the first time that person has ever expressed that this is the place where I feel unlovable.
Wow.
And that grief has probably been there forever. And there's been a secret hope that our love would grow, where you could love me in places that were never loved before. And there's this secret pain and disappointment. So what I see, the flip side, like the fear has been that if we go there, we'll never come out. So we better just keep it positive. We better just keep it light and get on with the routine that works. But what I see on the flip side of that is so beautiful. I call it optimistic melancholy. So there's sadness about all the grief of what we never received before we came together. There's sadness that we weren't able to provide this to each other before, but now we can understand it. We can grieve for that, but we can be here for each other. And then there's an optimism that next time this happens, I'll catch you. Right. Next time this happens, I'll come looking for you. That rather than criticising you for backing away, I'll say, look, is this what's happened? You've been overwhelmed again. Rather than judging it from the outside criteria, it's stepping into an understanding of the internal culture. And that has to be not just understood, it needs to be experienced together. And so some of those moments people say to me, how can you sit there and just listen to people's problems all day? It's like, you don't understand what I do. To bear witness to that is the birth of something new that people secretly thought would never happen. That's where sadness, flatness, dysthymia, depression come from. But to see that open up is miraculous.
How wonderful.
It's
how rewarding
amazing.
for
It's
you.
incredible. Yeah.
We're going to chat about painful patterns now. Tell me what a painful pattern is.
I guess if you've got a personality, then you've got something that you're protecting under pressure. And so for a lot of people, we'll go back to, it's the funniest thing, the more we're under pressure, the more we'll put ourselves in the back seat and the more we'll put other people first.
Really?
That's a very, very common one. Yeah. So it sounds like this. No, I'm fine.
Yep.
It's been kind of hard, but anyway, how are you?
Okay.
We say things like, first world problems. So we minimise, and there's kind of a flavour of the blues. It's kind of like, yes, this is painful, but we make a light sort of joke about it, and move on. So that's a very, very
bravado.
common one. One of the things we see for men all the time is that one of the pain points of this painful patterns is around a lack of achievement.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Okay.
In our culture, it's like the idea of the self-made man, that if I'm going to achieve and provide for my family, then I have to be smart enough and strong enough to go out and make things happen. And so for a lot of guys, there's a lot of distance simply because of the shame that effectively they haven't gone out hunting successfully and they've had nothing to bring back to the tribe, so they don't feel like they've got a right to sit around the fire with everyone else. So they keep themselves at a distance.
Okay.
This is part of why we've got bottle shops next to every supermarket in the country, to try to soothe that pain. So again, these are things that are sort of implicitly understood in couples but never fully spoken about.
Yeah. I imagine finances would be a big one.
The classics are in-laws.
Okay.
And we laugh because it's true.
Yes,
yeah?
exactly.
I won't ask if you've had a direct experience of that, Lou.
We could talk about in-laws, in another session
We
if
could
you
do
like.
a whole show. Yeah, absolutely. Because you've got such complexity of cultures from the family and then within each personality and then each of the little tribes within each family as well. So it's pretty intense. So in-laws, money, sex, all of those sort of things. And then you've got the developmental phases, coming together, children, marriage, deaths, empty nest sort of experiences. All of these things are going to trip up any of those pain points that have been hidden for some time.
Okay. And a lot of men historically are quite stoic and perhaps don't express themselves as much as women do. I know growing up, a lot of the men in my life were like that. We don't talk about emotions. We just, as you said, we just push them to the back and say everything is fine.
Well, it was dangerous. These generations came from a depression and from World War II. That's been, in some ways a defining part of the family that I'm from. That there was so much trauma that you don't want to open stuff up when you're traumatised, or if you're in the middle of a war zone. It's not a time to sit down, have a cup of tea and start being warm and fuzzy. You have to harden up.
Yeah.
So functionally, this is the sad part for a lot of men, and that they've missed out on having models of how do we be close, and just not having any idea about how to do that. And then they see men that go far too far the other way,
right?
that are just caricatures of being really airy. Fairy, and you don't want to go in that direction.
Yeah. So there's a happy medium there. Yeah,
absolutely. But it has to be done. All of the stuff that we're talking about today is that we can't read this in books. We need to have not just understanding but experiences with one another.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where things start. We get proof that it's safe to do things differently. And we learn who we are through relating with others. And really our personality or our sense of self, it's an internal dialogue. It's like we're talking to someone inside our own head.
Yeah, sometimes that voice is not very nice, is it? Sometimes you just want to shut that voice up and ignore it. Okay, so we've talked about painful patterns. Now, how about pain points? I know you mentioned pain points. Can we chat about them?
Well, they're going to be tripped over just through daily life, and often they're going to be triggered even by something that hasn't happened.
Right.
We're going to be, injured or hurt by the fact that someone didn't notice, or they didn't care, or they didn't make the effort. They just took us for granted.
Yeah. And
so that can be a sort of tricky thing too, that we become, really sensitive, either depressed, anxious or aggressive about what never arrived. And then we can feel, again, like we don't deserve to speak about that, because it's likely to be we kept quiet about it because there was no one to respond to that in the past. And so we kind of feel fearful, or like it's strange if we go asking for something that we've never received. It feels like a very risky thing to do. So it could be something active that someone's done that's stepped on something that's painful, but it could just be the absence of that. We see that a lot of this with trauma is that there are these acts of omission, acts of commission. So commissions are the intrusions. The omissions are the things that we've been missing out on, and they can be equally painful.
Okay, how big do you think trust and compromise are in a relationship?
I guess it's very, very hard to compromise when you're in pain and you're starving to death.
Okay.
So there'd be a lot of sort of brittle fragility around that.
Yeah.
Again, if we can build trust by having these new experiences where we start to get some of those primary needs met, then all of the creativity can start coming back in. You know, that's what I find, is that once people can care for those sore spots, then they don't need me.
Okay.
They become their own therapists,
Yeah.
and they start discovering their way.
So you can show them the way, and then they can go on. And
if we can show them the way to find each other in the painful spots, then they can feel safer, and then date nights, fun, holidays, all those things start to actually happen and go a lot more smoothly. Because, you know, who wants to go on holiday if there's going to be a screaming match coming out of the blue? You know? Yeah. Who wants to have a romantic dinner if there's nothing but pain about what you're not receiving? This person just doesn't get me.
Yeah.
You know?
Can people be together for 30 or 40 years and then still have issues?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
What I find is like that idea that time heals.
Yep.
is simply not true.
Okay.
Time provides an opportunity for new experiences to come in.
Okay.
But if we've been defensive around some of those things because it's been too overwhelming, then those experiences will never arrive.
Okay.
So some depressive thoughts are really legitimate, that there's the absence and an impossibility of certain types of love ever arriving until we have these experiences that prove that they're safe.
Because I often hear about relationships with people who've been together for 30 years, and I think, hey, you know, you've ridden the wave for that long.
You're clear, you're out of the woods.
Yeah, and then they split up. And I think,
yes.
Haven't you worked it all out by then?
Well, they've been in a holding pattern that's helped them survive.
Yeah.
And so as mammals, we'll go with that compromise every day of the week under stress.
Yeah.
We'll go to what kind of work. It's kind of like if you're falling off a cliff, you'll grab hold of any branch, no matter how loose that might be. You'll take whatever you can get. And so what happens is that, yes, you can write out your entire life. For many generations and many people, sadly, live half a life, have half a relationship, because it's better than nothing.
And they're going to hang on to when the kids go or when we retire.
Absolutely.
Or there's always a reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But to honour your question, yes, there are those specific developmental points. Again, kids leaving the home to go to school for the first time is a really big one.
Okay.
Because we came together and there was all this magic.
Yep.
And then we forgot about ourselves because we had to focus on our child. Now the child doesn't need us quite as much, and I've been starving to death, and where are you?
Yep.
And we're just not connecting the way that we used to. So that's really common. All those other ones. Parents becoming ill, children starting high school, children leaving school to go to university or start their own lives. And those empty nest experiences can be really confronting as well. A lot of people avoid retirement.
I was one of those people.
Yeah, right.
Because not necessarily about a relationship, but I didn't know what I was going to do with myself.
Yeah,
what am I going to do? I'm so used to this pattern.
Yes.
For so many years.
Yes.
Who am I without this role?
Exactly.
Anyway, let's get off.
But we won't spend too much time analysing you.
Let's not.
But that's so common, is that people will avoid retirement because it's not just who am I, but who the hell are we?
Yeah.
Who are we now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people, rather than facing those fears, they'll go broad, and then that will be an affair. Looking for that connection somewhere else. They'll have a little bit of the magic that they might have been missing, which can be a bit of a sugar high, but inevitably they'll fall back into the same place because they're not able to get those needs met at a deeper level.
All right. Well, anything else we need to cover before we sign off?
I guess I'd just offer that to people, that this idea of we've just got to be positive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. But at the same time, if we can pay some respect to the fact that as human beings, we've all got these sore spots, the more we can articulate those signals a new level of intimacy, despite age. And to me, despite age, that's what real maturity is about.
Okay.
Is that we're able to step into the unknown, care for those spots that might not have been cared for before, and that it's almost inevitable that I use this analogy all the time. If a car is going to be serviced, no matter the quality of the car, we just expect that it's going to need a little bit of care from time to time.
Yeah.
So why not would that be the case for an individual? Why would it not be the case for a couple?
Yeah.
And so we don't tend to have a sense of a tribe. We don't tend to have elders that we can go to support us with that. So it's not that there's anything wrong with the relationship, it's that it's stepping up to a new level of depth, which is going to provide more flexibility for it to grow. And so that's not a failing, you know. That's just the next level. You know, so
fabulous. Okay, thank you, Todd.
My pleasure, Lou. Thanks so much.
No worries. I've been chatting to Todd Zemek with a Z or a Z,
Yep.
depending where
either
you
way, whatever continent you're from.
From Coolum.